You've probably felt it before. That strange tension in your chest when you realize something doesn't add up in your relationship. She smiles at you, she says the right words, but deep down, you know she's the one pulling the strings. And here's the brutal truth most men never want to admit: sometimes, you're not in control of the relationship at all. You're being guided, directed, even manipulated without even realizing it. Now, I'm not talking about Hollywood-level drama, shouting matches, or obvious red flags. I'm talking about subtle tricks. Psychological games so well practiced that they feel invisible, until it's too late. That's why so many men wake up years later wondering, how did I lose myself in this relationship? And the answer is simple: because they never learned to spot the signs. Before we dive in, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, because what I'm about to reveal could save you from wasting years of your life on relationships that drain you instead of building you up. Here's the shocking reality: the most dangerous manipulations aren't the loud ones, they're the quiet ones. The ones that look like love, sound like care, and feel like intimacy, but in reality, they're control mechanisms. These tricks don't just appear out of nowhere. They're rehearsed, refined, and repeated until they're second nature. And if you don't recognize them, you'll confuse manipulation with affection. So let me paint a picture for you. You meet her. She's charming, magnetic, knows exactly what to say. Within days, you feel like you've known her for years. She laughs at your jokes, she leans in close, she makes you feel like the most important man in the room. And for a while, you think you've found something rare, something special. But here's the hidden danger: sometimes what feels like chemistry is actually training. You're not falling in love. You're being conditioned. Conditioned to respond to her emotions. Conditioned to react to her approval. Conditioned to seek her validation more than your own self-respect. And once that conditioning takes root, it becomes incredibly hard to break free. That's why this series is so important. Because once you see the patterns, you can't unsee them. Once you recognize the manipulation, you can stop falling for it. And once you understand the psychology behind it, you'll realize that the power was never really hers, it was yours, all along. Over the next few chapters, we're going to uncover 5 of the most common manipulation tricks women use, and more importantly, how you can spot them before they destroy your confidence, your boundaries, and your attraction. Backhand index pointing right. But let me ask you right now, have you ever felt like you were giving everything in a relationship, only to feel less respected the more you gave? Drop a comment below, I want to hear your story. Because today is the beginning of a wake-up call. A wake-up call that separates men who get played from men who play smart. Let's talk about one of the oldest manipulation tricks in the book, guilt. You know how it works. You say no to something reasonable, or you put your own priorities first, and suddenly, the air shifts. Her face hardens, her tone changes, and instead of respecting your boundary, she hits you with the dagger of emotional weight. If you really loved me, you'd do it. Sound familiar? Here's the harsh truth: guilt is one of the most effective tools used to control men. Why? Because most men are conditioned to equate sacrifice with love. You've been told since you were a boy that good men always put others first, that the measure of your worth is how much you give up for the people you care about. And women who understand this can weaponize it against you. Think about it. How many times have you agreed to something you didn't want to do, whether it was lending money, canceling plans, or even compromising your values, just to avoid the heavy silence, the disappointed look, or the subtle suggestion that you weren't man enough to handle her needs? That's not love. That's control through guilt. Backhand index pointing right. And if you've ever felt trapped in that cycle, drop a comment below. I want to hear how many of you have been caught in the guilt trap. Now, here's the psychology behind it. Guilt works because it shifts the frame of the conversation. Instead of debating whether the request is reasonable, guilt makes you debate your worth. You stop asking, "Do I want to do this?" and start asking, "What does it say about me if I don't?" And that's where men lose the battle. Because once your self-worth is tied to her approval, you'll bend over backwards to avoid disappointing her, even when it means disappointing yourself. But let's be clear, compromise is normal in healthy relationships. The difference is this: compromise comes from choice, guilt comes from pressure. Compromise builds respect. Guilt erodes it. Every time you give in to guilt, you teach her that your boundaries can be bypassed with a sad look, a frustrated sigh, or a carefully chosen phrase. And here's the kicker: the more it works, the more it gets used. What starts as subtle hints grows into full-blown emotional manipulation. Before long, you're no longer living your life, you're living hers. So how do you break free? You start by recognizing the pattern. When you feel that heavy pit in your stomach, when you notice you're about to agree just to avoid conflict, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this out of love or out of fear? Because love comes with freedom. Fear comes with chains. And let me promise you this: the moment you stop reacting to guilt, everything changes. At first, she might push harder. She might escalate. But when she sees that guilt no longer moves you, she'll be forced to adjust. And in that adjustment, you'll see her true intentions. Was she with you because of who you are? Or because of what you could be pressured into giving? That's the power of spotting manipulation. Once you see the trick, it loses its magic. Silence can be louder than words. In relationships, one of the most subtle yet devastating manipulation tricks is the silent treatment. At first glance, it seems harmless. After all, what damage can come from someone simply refusing to talk? But beneath the surface, this tactic is designed to create pressure, guilt, and emotional confusion. It's not about solving problems. It's about control. The silent treatment works by exploiting a man's natural instinct to fix problems. When a woman suddenly withdraws and refuses to communicate, most men feel a surge of anxiety. Thoughts begin to spiral. Did I do something wrong? Did I say the wrong thing? Is she upset with me for a reason I don't understand? That uncertainty becomes unbearable. And here's the trap: the more silence she gives, the more desperate he becomes to break it. This manipulation flips the roles in the relationship. Instead of two people addressing a problem together, one partner dictates the emotional climate by withholding connection. The man, in turn, becomes consumed with chasing reconciliation. He tries harder, apologizes for things he doesn't fully grasp, and offers concessions just to restore peace. He's not solving the issue, he's surrendering his position to regain a sense of harmony. The brilliance of this tactic lies in its ambiguity. Silence doesn't give you something concrete to push against. There are no clear accusations, no arguments you can refute, no facts to discuss. Instead, it's a vacuum, an absence of clarity that forces you to fill in the blanks yourself. That uncertainty breeds urgency, and urgency makes you easy to manipulate. Over time, the silent treatment teaches a destructive lesson: if you want peace, you must comply. The man becomes conditioned to anticipate silence as punishment. The moment it happens, he feels the urge to bend, to prove himself, to do whatever it takes to end the discomfort. The woman, consciously or unconsciously, learns that silence is an effective weapon. Each time it works, the cycle reinforces itself. But here's the truth: a healthy relationship doesn't thrive in silence. Real intimacy is built on communication, even when it's uncomfortable. When silence is used as punishment, it erodes trust. It tells the man that his needs and emotions don't matter unless he submits. And it tells the woman that she doesn't need to respect him, only control him. Recognizing this pattern is the first step to breaking it. When faced with the silent treatment, the worst thing a man can do is panic and beg for reconciliation. That only validates the tactic. Instead, he must hold his ground, refuse to chase clarity where none is offered, and calmly demand open communication. If silence continues, then the silence itself becomes the answer, a sign of manipulation, not love. There is a subtle weapon that often flies under the radar, yet its impact can be devastating: comparisons. These remarks may sound casual on the surface: "My ex used to do this," or "my friend's husband treats her differently," but their effect cuts deep into a man's sense of worth. At first, these comparisons don't always feel like direct attacks. They are often wrapped in an innocent tone, as if they were harmless observations. But what they actually communicate is disapproval and dissatisfaction. They suggest that no matter what you do, you are being measured against another man's standard, and in that measurement, you come up short. The damage lies not in the words themselves, but in the message beneath them: you are not enough. Every time a man hears those phrases, his subconscious registers rejection. Instead of feeling like a man of value, he begins to internalize the idea that he must constantly compete, prove himself, or change who he is just to meet an ever-shifting expectation. And here's the truth: comparison erodes respect faster than open conflict. Why? Because conflict at least acknowledges you directly. But comparisons erase individuality altogether. They reduce you to a scoreboard, where your actions are tallied against someone else's. Over time, this creates insecurity, doubt, and resentment. A man begins to question whether he's worthy, and ironically, this desperation to prove his value only reinforces the sense of inadequacy. Think of it like this: attraction is built on perception. When you're confident and grounded, you project value. But when you start chasing after approval, trying to outdo a ghost from the past or an image of perfection you can never meet, you hand away your power. The more you try to beat the comparison, the more you validate it. Instead of standing as a man in his own right, you become a contestant in someone else's game. Some men, without realizing it, will try to fix the situation by asking, "What did he do that I don't?" or "Tell me what I need to change." But this only digs the hole deeper. It communicates insecurity, not strength. A high-value man does not compete with shadows. He recognizes that comparisons are a tactic, sometimes conscious, sometimes not, that undermine his role. And instead of reacting with panic, he responds with calm boundaries. So what does that look like in practice? It means not taking the bait. When faced with a comparison, you don't argue with it, and you don't scramble to prove yourself. Instead, you show, through your presence and standards, that you will not play that game. Confidence, after all, is not about winning every challenge, it's about refusing to engage in battles that don't deserve your energy. And here's where the suspense builds. Because as damaging as comparisons are, they are not the final blow. There is one tactic, above all others, that destroys attraction more ruthlessly than any subtle remark, any silence, or any manipulation. It's the ultimate trap, and in the next chapter, we'll uncover it in full detail. Among the most destructive tactics in relationships, one stands out for its subtlety and emotional weight: playing the victim. Unlike comparisons or silence, which attack indirectly, this method appeals to a man's sense of responsibility, guilt, and empathy. It's powerful because it doesn't look like manipulation, it looks like suffering. The dynamic begins when she frames herself as powerless, mistreated, or constantly misunderstood. Every argument, no matter how small, shifts away from the actual issue and becomes about her pain. She might say things like, "You don't understand how hard it is for me," or "Everyone always lets me down." On the surface, these sound like cries for help. But underneath, they often serve a different purpose, shifting the burden of resolution entirely onto the man. Here's how the trap works. The moment she adopts the victim role, the man instinctively feels pressure to fix things. Men are wired to solve problems, to step into the role of protector. So, instead of holding his ground, he begins to shoulder blame even when it isn't his fault. He apologizes for things outside of his control, changes his behavior to accommodate unreasonable expectations, and becomes her emotional savior. At first, this may look like love, compassion, or loyalty. But slowly, it corrodes respect. Because what starts as comfort soon turns into obligation. The man stops being her partner and becomes her rescuer. And the more he rescues, the more she reinforces the victim narrative because it gives her power without accountability. This shift has a devastating effect on attraction. Women do not respect a man who abandons his own standards to carry someone else's emotional weight. Instead of being seen as strong, he becomes seen as weak, useful, dependable, but not desirable. His identity is no longer built on who he is, but on how well he can manage her moods. The danger of the victim card is that it disguises itself as vulnerability. Genuine vulnerability, sharing fears, doubts, or struggles, creates intimacy. But weaponized vulnerability turns intimacy into a trap. The man is manipulated into constant caretaking, while his own needs and boundaries are ignored. Over time, this imbalance breeds frustration, resentment, and even shame. The way out is recognition. A high-value man learns to distinguish between authentic vulnerability and manipulation. He listens with empathy, but he does not abandon his sense of self. He offers support, but he refuses to take on responsibilities that do not belong to him. Most importantly, he resists the urge to save someone who benefits from staying in the victim role. And here's the harsh truth: respect is not built by rescuing, it's built by standing firm. A man who sets clear emotional boundaries communicates strength. He shows that while he can care deeply, he will not sacrifice his integrity to play the role of savior. This closes the cycle of manipulation we've explored. From subtle guilt to silence, comparisons, and finally the victim card, these tactics all share one goal: shifting power. But once you see the patterns, you can resist them. You stop reacting, stop rescuing, and start leading with clarity and strength. Now the question is, have you ever recognized this pattern in your own life? Drop a comment and share your story. Because awareness is the first step to breaking free. Among all the manipulation tactics, few are as dangerous and as difficult to detect as future faking. This strategy doesn't rely on direct confrontation, guilt, or silence. Instead, it offers the most intoxicating drug in human psychology: hope. Future faking works by painting a picture of a perfect tomorrow. She says things like, "One day we'll get married, when things calm down, we'll move in together, or when the time is right, I'll finally commit to you." These words light up a man's imagination. He stops looking at the reality in front of him and begins living in the fantasy of what could be. The trap is powerful because it feels positive. Unlike criticism or comparisons, future faking doesn't sound like manipulation, it sounds like vision, ambition, even love. But behind the promise lies a dangerous truth: it's not about building a future, it's about controlling the present. Here's how it works. By dangling the idea of a future together, she keeps him invested even when her actions in the present don't match her words. He tolerates neglect, disrespect, or lack of commitment because he believes the real relationship is just around the corner. He sacrifices his needs now for the hope of tomorrow. And as long as that hope exists, she doesn't need to change a thing. This creates a cycle of waiting. The man begins to postpone his own standards, dreams, and decisions. He tells himself, "She said she's not ready yet, but she will be soon." Each time he thinks about leaving, the memory of her promise pulls him back. And the more time he invests, the harder it becomes to walk away, because no one wants to admit they've been building on a foundation of illusions. The psychological mechanism here is simple but devastating. Humans are wired to endure hardship if they believe a reward is coming. It's the same principle that keeps gamblers pulling the lever or investors holding on to a failing stock. The hope of maybe tomorrow blinds them to the reality of not today. And just like gambling, the house always wins. Because in future faking, the reward is never real, it's just delayed indefinitely. The man remains stuck in a loop of promises without delivery, always believing he's on the verge of finally earning the love or commitment he desires. The cost is enormous. He loses years waiting for a tomorrow that never arrives. His self-respect erodes as he accepts less than he deserves in the present. And perhaps worst of all, he blinds himself to opportunities with women who are ready, genuine, and committed now because his heart is chained to a fantasy. The antidote is clarity. A man of value doesn't judge by words, he judges by actions. If her present behavior doesn't reflect the future she promises, then the promise is empty. Respect yourself enough to demand consistency. Believe patterns, not speeches. And here's the final warning: promises are easy, but action is rare. Don't build your life on someday. Build it on what's happening right now. You've now seen 5 of the most common manipulation tricks women can use in relationships. Each one works in a subtle way, but together they form a powerful system that can break a man's confidence if he doesn't recognize what's happening. First, we talked about emotional guilt tripping, the tactic of making a man feel responsible for her feelings. This keeps him on edge, always trying to repair emotions that aren't his to carry. Second, we exposed the silent treatment where she withholds communication, forcing him into panic and desperation to fix a situation he can't even define. Third, we looked at painful comparisons, phrases that quietly cut into his confidence, making him feel inadequate by comparing him to others, whether it's an ex, a friend's husband, or anyone she claims is better. Fourth, we uncovered the victim card, the strategy of always being the one who suffers, which manipulates a man into becoming the emotional savior, carrying burdens that aren't his responsibility. And finally, we analyzed future faking, the trap of false promises, keeping him invested in an illusion of tomorrow while the present never truly changes. Each of these tactics works for one reason: they bypass logic and strike directly at a man's emotions. Guilt, confusion, hope, and the instinct to protect are all powerful levers. And if a man doesn't know how to spot them, he ends up trapped, spending years trying to fix problems that were never his to solve. But here's the key: awareness changes everything. Once you can name these tricks, they lose their power. When you hear guilt tripping, you pause and remind yourself, her emotions are her responsibility. When silence is used as a weapon, you step back instead of chasing validation. When comparisons surface, you remember your worth isn't measured against someone else. When the victim card is played, you resist becoming the rescuer. And when empty promises appear, you demand consistency between words and actions. Recognition is the first step. Boundaries are the second. A man who knows these traps and stands firm against them becomes a man who cannot be controlled. And in that strength, respect and attraction flow naturally, because true desire only survives when there is balance and authenticity. So here's your call to action. If this video opened your eyes, hit the like button right now. If you want to see more content exposing these hidden dynamics, subscribe so you never miss the next lesson. And in the comments, share your experience. Which of these manipulations have you lived through? Your story might be exactly what another man needs to break free from the same trap. And one more thing, don't keep this to yourself. Share this video with a friend who might be struggling. Sometimes a single conversation, a single insight, is enough to wake someone up to the reality they've been ignoring. The truth is simple: You don't win by fixing manipulation, you win by seeing it clearly and refusing to play the game.